In this video we're going to look at site clearance. This is the first part of most projects where you're clearing the site ready to do the actual construction work. So you're removing topsoil, grass, any structures that need to be removed, any trees that need to be removed. So let's start with the grass and scrub. So grass is usually cut or grazed short. When I say grazed, if it's farmland, you usually get cattle or sheep to graze it down. And you can remove the topsoil and the grass together. It's very hard to separate the grass from the topsoil. The grass actually breaks down over time and becomes topsoil anyhow. But you do need to graze it down, make it short so that you're not getting too much grass in with the topsoil. Scrub, that's sort of like small trees and vegetation that's bigger than grass. You cut it down to the ground level. You either use slashes or an excavator to rip them up. If you can, you can leave the roots in with the topsoil, although if they are significant shrubs you probably need to pull the roots out as well. It can be chipped down to reduce the volume for transport. So once you've actually removed it, you either burn it on site or you transport it off site. And chipping it, breaking it and putting it through a tree chipper means that the truck can carry more content rather than have the trees unchipped. You can also use the chip material, if it's the right type of material, as ground cover during the reinstatement. So putting a cover of that chipped material over top protects the soil while the new grass is actually growing through. So here's some pictures of site clearance. Top left there, you can see they're just going through with a loader with a bucket, sort of just skimming off the topsoil. That's not the best way to do it. It's probably just a bit of what plant they had on site. The better way to do it is to use an excavator here. So you can see the excavator is quite a good machine for this sort of thing. It can rip out trees, it can skim off the topsoil, it can do all that sort of stuff. You've got specialist machines like this, which is sort of going along and removing or breaking up the ground cover. And this is what I mean about chipping. You put it through a chipper. So they've cut the trees and they're putting it through this chipper, which breaks it into small chips. In this case here, they're just blowing it all over the ground to provide more ground cover. Alternatively, you could have a truck parked under here, collecting that and then taking it off site, or taking it to a stockpile for reuse. Tree removal. Tree removal is a specialist job. It's very, very dangerous. You're using chainsaws at height, which are two very dangerous things. Chainsaws can do some serious damage, and so can falling from height. So you can see these guys here are professionals. They've got full climbing gear on, they've got harnesses, they've got chainsaws, they know how to use those chainsaws at height. This is not a job that you want someone that's not trained doing. In fact, you shouldn't. Chopping down the trees weigh a lot. If they're not chopped the right way, when they fall they can cause some serious damage to people or structures. So once again, this is where you pull in the specialist subcontractors to do the work. The tree itself can be chipped or removed whole. The roots need to be removed as well, and you can do that with a claw fitting on an excavator. They're really able to be reused as building timber. They just don't grow well enough to be good building timber, and it costs quite a lot to actually mill it down to usable building sections. So normally they're just chopped up and used as firewood. Demolition. So demolition of existing structures. Manually you can use jackhammers. We'll talk about those in a minute. Or for bigger jobs you can use excavators with claw fittings or jackhammer fittings. Wrecking balls for bigger structures, or blasting. So let's look at some of those. So jackhammers, they combine a hammer with a chisel. So here's a picture of one here. There's a vibrating weight in there which is going up and down and bashing this chisel into the ground. So that's what a jackhammer is basically. So there's a little internal hammer going up and down, going bang bang bang, and bashing the chisel into the ground. They can be electric powered, so these ones are all handheld. For smaller jobs. For bigger jobs you need a bigger one which can't be held by a worker, so it needs to be mounted on an excavator, and we'll look at one of those in a minute. They can be petrol powered, so this has got a little petrol engine in here driving the hammer. Pneumatic, we'll look at pneumatics in a minute. So you can see there's the compressor providing compressed air, there's the hose running the compressed air through to the jackhammer, which is being driven by the compressed air. Or electric, otherwise known as Kango hammers, so they've got an electric motor in there powered by a cord. They're quite heavy and they're not as good as pneumatic ones, but if you've got a power source close by, it saves you having to bring in a compressor, so they are quite convenient when you've got a power source available to you. So looking at pneumatics, remember that's one type of way of doing things. They can be used for jackhammers, rock drills, scabblers. They're all powered by pneumatics. So pneumatics is basically just compressed air. So you've got a diesel engine there driving a compressor, which is basically just like a pump, but it's pumping air, so it's pumping the air, increasing the pressure, 500 to 700 kPa. And that pressurized air runs through that and then runs pneumatic motors. Pneumatic motors are smaller than electric or diesel powered motors, so therefore they're lighter, but they can provide just as much power. All the power is being produced here, and if you like, the power is being transferred from the compressor to the unit using the compressed air. Another good thing about compressed air is that if the hose gets broken, you just get a whole lot of air sort of blowing around, as opposed to say an electric powered machine where if you cut the cord you've got a hazard there, you've got electricity which can cause all sorts of problems. These things are also okay in water, so if you're working in quite wet conditions, you don't really want to be having electric tools even though they are insulated. Pneumatic tools are actually quite good. Once again, they're not really affected by water as much as electric power tools are. So here's a guy there, so there's the compressor, there's the hose, and there's the man working on the jackhammer. In this case here he's got a spade fitting and he's just lifting top asphalt off a road. You can see he's quite a big guy. Even a pneumatic jackhammer takes a lot of muscle to handle. They're very heavy machines. The vibrations are really quite punishing, so it takes you have to be pretty hard to sort of work on these all day. Heavy demolition. As I mentioned before, you can mount jackhammers on excavators. So here you've got an excavator and that's jackhammer fitting. So what they've done is they've pulled the bucket off, and you can do this, and replaced the bucket with a jackhammer. And you can see the jackhammer is powered by the hydraulics from the excavator. We're going to look at hydraulics when we look at excavators in the next topic. So the bucket can be replaced. Alternatively, you can replace the bucket with a claw. So that's a claw fitting like your hand. So there's one part of it, and then the thumb is there. So it can reach down, pick stuff up, and it can actually rip stuff apart as well. So you can have them breaking up concrete buildings as well. This one here can pick up the material and load it onto a truck, but this obviously just breaks it all up. So you need to pick up the debris at the end of it. And loaders are really ideal. So the loader just goes along, picks up the broken material, loads it into a truck. Wrecking ball is even more serious way of doing things. Basically it's mounted on a crane. You need a pretty heavy piece of equipment because it's a very heavy ball and it's just being swung. So you can imagine that there's a lot of forces trying to tip over the crane. So excavators, sometimes you see a wrecking ball on them, but they're not really built for that sort of thing. They're not big enough. So here you've got a serious crane with a wrecking ball on, and all it does is it just batters the building, just pummels it until it all falls down. The advantage of this is that the operator is quite a distance away from what's being wrecked, and so he's safer. There's less danger of debris falling on the operator. You also see excavators that have got long arms on them as well, and they are also the same sort of philosophy, that the operator is a great distance away from the falling debris. Rock breaking, when you're striking hard rock and things, sometimes your only alternative is to actually break it up. You can see them here, they're drilling holes into the rock, and then they'll either load them with dynamite or expanding grout, as is the case here. So they normally have a bit of a pattern there, then they load the dynamite in and they blast, and all it does is it cracks the rock and enables a face shovel or an excavator to pick it up. So this here I think is expanding grout. So you can see they put a pattern in there. So it's not dynamite, what that is cement, a cement mix, and when it goes in it starts drying and it expands and it cracks the rock with the expansion. But that only works with certain types of rock, and it does take a little bit more time and it's not as effective as blasting, but it's obviously not as noisy or as potentially dangerous as blasting. There are other ways of breaking up rock or soft rock. You can use a bulldozer with a ripper, and we'll look at that when we look at earthworks in the next session. So that concludes these videos for this topic.